And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another, that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming, and of the end of the world? So we see in the first 3 verses here that the disciples are questioning Jesus, basically wanting to know when the end's going to be. And we hear that a lot today. People are fascinated. And no, things really haven't changed. People are fixated on the end times. There's thousands of different titles of books. There's thousands of movies, films, everything where people have put their spin on what they think is going to happen, or just an idea they came up with on something that might happen. So again, just put yourself in their shoes. They've got the guy in front of them that they think is able to actually answer the question. So we have in verse 4, and it says, And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. So Jesus is explaining here that there are going to be people who literally are going to claim to be Christ, and there are people who are figuratively claim to be a modern-day Messiah, right? He also says, as we read, that there'll be wars, diseases, famines, natural disasters, religious persecution, all of which will lead up to his return. And Jesus also states that the gospel will be preached unto all the nations. All right, let's go again to verse 19. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. But then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. So Jesus is telling again about the rise of false prophets, and warns his disciples not to fall prey to that. He also explains that when he returns, it won't be mistakable. We'll recognize it. Pretty much, in other words, if you're curious or if there's any doubt in your mind, then it's not him, right? We're going to recognize it and we're going to know. As we see in the last verse we read there in verse 28, Jesus compares the circling, it says, of eagles or vultures. That's pretty much a universal sign of there's something dead where they're circling, right? So that's he's trying to convey that as certain as that sign is, that when you see it, you know what's underneath the eagles or the vultures that are circling. You'll know exactly that his coming is returned. He is returned. All right, now let's go to verse 28. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the other shall be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. So that got me thinking when I was reading the last few verses there, talking about the days of the flood. They knew not until the flood occurred. I don't know if you guys remember this, but you've probably seen videos of it. If anybody watches the Weather Channel, it's usually on there a lot. In 2004 in the Indian Ocean, there was a massive earthquake, which led to a tsunami that hit basically all of Southeast Asia there. And parts of Indonesia, where a lot of people were vacationing, one of the biggest beaches there. The government of Indonesia, obviously it's a developing country, they didn't have a tsunami warning system like they were supposed to. The buoys that they usually have offshore to detect an incoming wave, they didn't have. So, and the people in this area couldn't feel the earthquake because it was miles away. So there were people literally on the beach as the wave approached. They had no warning, no time to think, no time to prepare. It just happened. No time to escape, right? So had they known that the tsunami was heading their way, they obviously would have evacuated. And this earthquake, with the earthquake and the following tsunami, led to 200,000 deaths in 2004. And I believe it was the day after Christmas that it happened. On a much smaller and less dramatic scale, last week I was at my grandpa's house and was mowing his grass. And he was leaving, and I went up to give him a hug, and I set my phone down on the front of the vehicle. And little did I know, about 5 minutes later, when my Bluetooth and my earbuds disconnected, my phone was down the road about a quarter of a mile pulverized by a coal track. So, again, if I would have known that was going to happen that day, I would have saved my messages. I would have backed my phone up. I would have prepared for that, or I would have at least had insurance. Unfortunately, I didn't on it. So if there was an earthquake miles away under the ocean, there wouldn't have been a need for an emergency system. If the emergency preparedness system that some of these places hadn't failed in Indonesia, there wouldn't have been that many deaths. If I had paid more attention and not left my phone on top of the vehicle, then I wouldn't have had that problem. So all those things there's a factor. There's human error, right? And they're uncertain. But the return of Jesus is certain. So therefore we must be ready. We must factor that into our lives and into our thoughts on how we are prepared. Okay, so verses 45 through 51 are what the lesson is actually about. But we had to read this to get context because it really doesn't make much sense unless we do that. So let's go ahead and read 45 through 51, and then we'll break it down verse by verse. So 45. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But, and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right, so in verse 45, we see that there is a faithful, wise servant that's been made ruler over the household by his master or his Lord. All right? And I think a lot of times, we say Lord, we make that synonymous with God, but really that's an old English term for master, right? So someone of authority. Verse 46 explains that the servant who's doing the work of the master or the Lord is blessed. 47 details what that blessing actually is, and explains that the Lord will make him ruler over all the possessions for his faithfulness. Verse 48 depicts a malevolent servant who seeks to take advantage of the absence of his master or his Lord and do his own will instead of the master's will because he's not around to see it. Verse 49 continues with the depiction of the unfaithful servant's actions. The servant has beaten his fellow servants and has mingled with the wrong crowd instead of serving his master and his fellow servants, in complete, total, and disregard of the responsibilities that were handed down to him by the master. Verse 50 states that the Lord of that unfaithful servant will appear when he isn't looking for him and at a time when he isn't planning on his arrival, essentially when he's completely caught off guard and least expects it. Verse 51 states that the Lord of the servants will cut him asunder or cut him off from his connection to the master and place him on equal footing with the outcasts and the hypocrites. Jesus finishes the parable by saying there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right. So now that we've read the preceding verses, which provide us the most context here, we can properly understand what he's talking about here in this parable. Jesus is warning his disciples to be ready for his return and to constantly be true to him and to be his faithful servant. He's also warning us not to stray away and follow after our own desires because our Lord, in this case Jesus, hasn't returned just yet. So in James 1:14 and 15, verse 14 says, But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Plainly put, we cannot and will not deceive God. And when we think, it's okay, God will forgive me. He's a loving and forgiving God, I'm going to go ahead and sin. That's the exact opposite of what we're supposed to do. And that's the exact opposite of what the unfaithful servant was doing here. In Romans chapter 6, verses 1 through 6, it says, What shall we say then? Shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? God forbid. How shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? Know ye not that so many of us, as were baptized into Jesus Christ, were baptized into his death? Therefore we are buried with him by baptism into death, that like as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, even so we also should walk in the newness of life. For if we have been planted together in the likeness of his death, we shall be also in the likeness of his resurrection. Knowing this, that our old man is crucified with him, that the body of sin might be destroyed, that henceforth we should not serve sin. So it's crucial that we're always ready. We're always prepared to meet the Lord. And, not only for his return, but anything could happen to us, we could die when we're leaving here, that's happened before. People here have fallen dead. So it's Jesus is warning here that we always need to be vigilant. We need to be ready for his coming or when we're going to meet him. And it's going to come at a time when we don't expect it. So only then can we truly work towards the goal of preparedness if we strive to not sin, even though we're going to sin, right? We've got to strive not to in order to be fully prepared to meet him. We can expect a reward just as the faithful servant had with all of his possessions, and our reward's heaven. However, the unfaithful servant who lived their life in a precarious way met a much different end when the master returned, as we saw in how Jesus concluded the parable by saying weeping and gnashing of teeth. That phrase is used multiple times, either to depict separation from God, torment, hell, several other things. Jesus is saying that this will be our fate if we're in the position that the unfaithful servant was, or the wicked servant. So remember in verse 13 that Jesus said, "But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved." If we're unsaved, if anyone in here is unsaved, Romans 8:13 basically tells us exactly how you can fix that. You can mortify or put to death the sins of your body and your life through the Spirit which is in Jesus Christ. For if you live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if ye through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. All you have to do is repent, and you'll be able to join your fellow servants in heaven one day. And that's all I have. Thank you all.
Bless you.